Floyd Collins was pinned by a 27-pound rock 55 feet underground where no one could reach him. 10,000 people came to watch. Someone sold balloons. Someone sold sandwiches. He died alone in the dark. You have felt stuck before. A traffic jam. A middle seat. A conversation you could not leave. Your body knows the word trapped as a feeling, a tightening in the chest, a wish to move that has nowhere to go. But there is a kind of stuck that most people never touch, and the ones who do rarely come back to describe it. Floyd came close enough to describe it. And what happened above the ground, in the daylight, while he lay in that hole, is somehow stranger than the trap itself. It was late January 1925. Floyd Collins was 37 years old, and he was a caveman in the most literal sense. Central Kentucky sits on top of one of the largest cave systems on Earth, a limestone honeycomb that runs for hundreds of miles in the dark. Floyd had grown up crawling into these holes. He knew them the way a farmer knows a field. And in the 1920s, caves were money. Mammoth Cave had become a tourist attraction, and the roads around it were lined with smaller commercial caves, each one hoping to catch the cars full of families driving down to see the underworld. Floyd wanted his own cave. He had already discovered one, Crystal Cave, but it sat too far off the main road, and the tourists never came. So he made a deal with the owners of a nearby farm. If he could find a new cave with an entrance close to the highway, they would split the profits. He started squeezing into a tight, unpromising hole called Sand Cave, wriggling deeper day after day, chasing the cool draft that meant open space somewhere below. On January 30th, he went in alone. This is the first thing you should hold on to. He went in alone into a passage so narrow he had to exhale to fit through parts of it, carrying a small oil lamp. He worked his way down through a series of tight crawls and drops, maybe found a promising chamber, and then turned to come back up. On the way out, in a low squeeze, his lamp went out. In the dark, his foot dislodged a rock from the cave wall. It fell and pinned his ankle. That is all it took. Not a collapse, not a flood, one rock the size of a bag of sugar, in exactly the wrong place. He could not reach it with his hands because of the way his body was folded into the passage. He could not pull his foot free. He was upside down at an angle, in a space barely wider than his shoulders, in total darkness, alone, and no one knew exactly where he was. Think about how small that is. The thing that beat one of the most experienced cavers in the country was not the cave's size or its danger. It was a single loose stone and a bad angle. The margin between free and trapped was maybe an inch. He was not found for around 20 hours. His brothers and some friends knew his general plans, and when he did not come home, they went looking. A young man named Jewel Estes finally spotted Floyd's feet in the darkness at the bottom of the squeeze. Floyd was conscious. He was talking. He asked for food and for light. And here is where the story stops being about a cave at all. Because getting to Floyd was almost impossible. The passage was so tight that a rescuer had to go in headfirst, slide down at a steep angle, and end up face to face with him with almost no room to work. You could not bring tools. You could barely bring your own arms. A man named Skeets Miller, a small newspaper reporter for the Louisville Courier-Journal, turned out to be one of the only people slight enough to reach him. Miller was not a rescuer. He was a journalist who had come to cover the story. Instead, he became part of it, crawling down again and again to bring Floyd food, to talk to him, and to try to dig the rock loose with his bare hands. Miller later won a Pulitzer Prize for what he wrote from inside that hole. And what he described was not panic. It was Floyd Collins, day after day, growing weaker, buried in cold and dripping water. Staying weirdly calm, he talked about his life. He asked about the weather up top. He made plans for when he got out. The human mind, faced with something it cannot escape, does not always scream. Sometimes it just keeps making small ordinary sentences, because the ordinary is the last thing that still belongs to you. Now pull back up to the surface, because this is where it turns into something almost impossible to believe. Word got out, and it did not spread like news. It spread like a carnival. Within days, the field above Sand Cave filled with people, not dozens, thousands. At its peak, an estimated 10,000 or more people crowded onto that Kentucky farmland to watch a man they could not see die in a hole they could not enter. Vendors showed up. Someone sold sandwiches. Someone sold balloons. There was music. Cars jammed the roads for miles. It became one of the biggest media events of the entire decade, carried by radio and by the new wire services into homes across the country. People who had never heard of Floyd Collins wept over him, argued about him, prayed for him, and bought hot dogs while they did it. You are watching this right now, in a way. The same instinct that filled that field is the one that stops your car at a wreck on the highway. The one that keeps you scrolling a stranger's tragedy at midnight. We are pulled toward the trapped and the dying with a force that feels almost gravitational. And we have not changed since 1925. We have only gotten faster at gathering. Down in the hole, none of that helped Floyd. The rescue was a disaster of good intentions. There were too many voices and no clear leader. Some wanted to keep digging toward him through the passage. Others wanted to sink a shaft straight down from the surface to reach him from a new angle. The two plans got in each other's way. Precious days were lost to argument and confusion. At one point the passage above Floyd partially collapsed, sealing off the direct route to him entirely. After that, no one could reach him at all. He was still alive, still down there, and now completely cut off, while the crowd above kept growing. They started digging the shaft. It was slow, dangerous work through unstable rock and mud, and it took days. Rescuers sank a vertical hole down toward where they believed Floyd was, then dug a lateral tunnel to break into his passage from the side. When they finally broke through, on February 17th, they reached him. He was dead. He had died of exposure, thirst, and hunger, probably 3 days before they got to him, still pinned by that same rock, roughly 5 feet down. He had been trapped for around 14 days. The rescue that 10,000 people had watched, that a nation had followed by radio, that would win a Pulitzer, had failed. The shaft reached a body. Here is the part that most people never learn. His story did not end when he died. Because Floyd's cave, the earlier one, Crystal Cave, was still a business. His family sold it. And a later owner, in one of the strangest decisions in the history of American tourism, put Floyd Collins' embalmed body on display inside a glass coffin in the cave as an attraction. For years, visitors paid to walk past the corpse of the man whose slow death had once held the country's attention. The body was even stolen at one point and later recovered, missing a leg. The man who died pinned by his foot lost that same leg after death. Think about what that means. The trap that killed him was a tiny rock and an inch of bad luck. But the thing that would not let him go was us. The attention. The crowd. The endless human hunger to look at someone else's worst hour. In life it filled a field with 10,000 strangers. In death it put him behind glass so strangers could keep looking. You started this hearing about a man pinned by a 27-pound rock, 5 feet down, where no one could reach him. But the cave was never really the smallest space in this story. The smallest space was the one we build around the suffering of a stranger, when we lean in close and watch and cannot look away. Floyd was stuck by a rock for 14 days. He has been held by our attention for 100 years. And the moment you finish this, and feel that pull to tell someone the strange, sad thing you just heard, you are standing in that Kentucky field too.